Today we're going to be discussing migrating from legacy tools to Datadog with RapDev. So you have myself. My name is Alex Glenn. I'm a senior Datadog engineer over here at RapDev. And then we also have my colleague over in Datadog, Rich Upshaw. He is a principal sales engineer.
Hi.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about a couple different things, but here's kind of an overall overview of what we're going to talk about. First, we've already gone through the introduction. So then we're going to talk about why organizations are moving from legacy tools. We're going to talk a little bit about how migrations work. We'll talk about the benefits of working with RapDev to do those migrations. We'll talk about how to improve visibility, how Datadog improves visibility, and then we'll talk about a few customer success stories at the end, and then we'll leave some time open at the very end for Q&A. So moving forward. Who is RapDev? So I think I might have slipped it. No. Who is RapDev? So RapDev, we are Datadog practitioners just like you. So we have done over 500 different implementations for Datadog all over the world. So Europe, US, South America, you name it, we probably had a deployment in that region. We've also have a large footprint in the Datadog marketplace. We have developed over 50 plus integrations. Additionally, we are independent of Datadog. We work very closely with them, but we are an independent partner of Datadog, and we have been their partner of the year for the last 5 years. So,
Introducing Datadog. Sorry, thank you, Alex. So Datadog is a observability and security platform that is ever growing. We currently have over 32,000 customers, some of the logos you see on the right-hand side. And we help all of these organizations get visibility into their infrastructure applications securely as they onboard and grow within Datadog. A real important thing to point out here that's different from many of the other tools out there is 30% of our revenue actually goes back into R&D. So we put a lot of money into research and development and the engineering teams to build out the platform that exists today. So taking a quick look through the history, Alex, if you pop one slide over, you can see the evidence of that investment and that growth over time. So Datadog originally founded in 2010 with a real-time unified platform upon which everything has been built on top. So starting out with infrastructure, so your standard monitoring, if you like, of hosts and VMs. Then in 2017, APM tracing came along, log management added in 2018, and from then on, things have accelerated. And this slide continues to grow, not only year over year, but month over month as we add new products to the platform, be it security, real user monitoring, LLM observability, to name just a few. It really is expanding and growing fast. But that's who RapDev are and who Datadog are. But more importantly, who are you on the call? One of my little bugbears about webinars is you never really see who's in the room. So to give you a sense of who's sitting virtually alongside you, we have a mixture of RapDev and Datadog customers or prospects. So there are varying levels of their observability journey with Datadog and therefore have varying degrees of Datadog knowledge. You're also at various stages of migrations, which are all unique to you. Whether you're using a different tool currently or whether you're partway through a migration, everybody's at a different stage. So we've designed this webinar to kind of cater for a lot of these different use cases and levels of knowledge. So let's begin by talking about why we typically see customers moving away from legacy tooling. There's a number of factors that we see again and again within the space. The first one is high ingestion costs of their current tooling. Many platforms have been purchased by organizations with an almost blanket license from a central cost center. And a lot of teams or business units within that organization see the platform as essentially free. They therefore push a huge amount of data into that platform, giving rise to really high ingestion and storage costs. Next up, for those who have taken on a much more open source platform style, they'll be running things locally in-house. The Elk stack, for example, is a really good example of this, where essentially everything is open source, but you're looking after infrastructure locally. You need to be standing up storage volumes, databases to store the data, and that overhead of just maintaining the infrastructure behind the observability platform really starts to take its toll as that platform grows and the usage grows within the organization. These almost lead into the third point here, and it's something that I see very often being limited real-time analytics, having the ability to pull up pieces of data right now, right when you need it, is actually quite hard for some organizations. I've seen huge environments where searching for logs will literally take minutes as you craft out that query, search for the logs, wait a little while, and have the results come back. More often than not, that query isn't quite right. You've not nailed into exactly what you're looking for. So, leading on to the fourth point, that performance drops off as more and more people consume the platform. So running into performance bottlenecks. And these really stick out like a sore thumb when you're in the middle of an outage or some sort of incident that you're dealing with, and you have a team of developers jumping into the platform at the same time, and everything slows down right when you really need it to be performant. We've already spoken a little bit about complex querying, but that also goes into dashboard and alerting, resulting in organizations relying on a small number of in-house experts who are able to build out dashboards and build out monitors as you need them. And quite often there'll be a bottleneck, again, there where people will ask for a dashboard, they'll put it into a Jira ticket and maybe not hear back for a few weeks, maybe even a couple of months I've heard of before until those dashboards are returned to you and ready to use. So if we jump onto the next slide, we can talk about why we're seeing customers migrating to Datadog today. First of all, hitting that cost-effective point. If we're talking about the log management solution specifically, over the past 12 months, Datadog have released a number of new features and new parts of the log platform, which enable you to really pick and choose what logs you keep, how long you keep them for, and what sort of retention level you keep them at. This allows you to capture much more information, but a very cost-effective way. And we'll see a little bit more towards the end of the webinar here. Next up, real-time monitoring and AI with AI-driven insights. This year has obviously been the year of AI, and Datadog is no exception. Taking all of the observability data that's coming into the platform from a customer, combining it with incidents that they're seeing and giving proactive monitors, giving proactive root cause analyses to those incidents have really helped customers get to the bottom of things really fast and keep that downtime to an absolute bare minimum. Datadog's a full cloud native environment, so there's no infrastructure to manage. It is all owned, managed, and maintained by Datadog themselves. We've touched on that faster troubleshooting, but the key message here is everything is unified together within Datadog. Single click from one data type, you can jump over to another, jump over to a dashboard really quickly. and also security and compliance. There has been a huge expansion in the security and compliance section of Datadog. So we're really, really digging into making sure that code runs securely in secure cloud environments, and all of that is visible in one place in Datadog via those simple to create alerts and dashboards. We've already spoken about the flexible logging options, but crucially, the main reason why your customers are coming to Datadog is because everything is faster to set up, using, and remediating issues. I think it's over to you,
All
Alex.
right. Yeah, it's all me. All right. So we've, as you've heard from Rich, he's talked a little bit about why you should do the Datadog. But what I'm here to talk about is how do you get over to Datadog? When you're migrating to Datadog, you want to basically establish some best practices. And what we've noticed is there tends to be kind of 6 overarching objectives that you want to make sure that you're tracking when you're starting to design a migration plan. So the first one you want to do is you always want to make sure to assess your current usage. This is looking at things like log ingestion, what if you're using what metrics you're collecting, what alerting you have, what dashboarding you have, how much is the tool getting used, where is the tool getting used, what's my tech stack, so on and so forth. And what this enables you is it allows you to understand what your monitoring environment looks like. It gives you an idea of what you currently have, what is critical to you, and what you need to carry over. And it kind of feeds into these other objectives as well. So kind of moving over to defining what the key migration objectives are, by assessing your current usage, you get to design these key migration objectives. So these can be stuff like what metadata is important to me. What are my key performance indicators inside of my environment? Is Datadog doing everything out of the box, or do I need to make sure that I have a custom integration set up, or do I need to deploy Oracle on certain hosts? Do I need to design automation around certain hosts, or do I need to ingest cloud? Making sure that you have these objectives, basically a list of everything that you want to carry over and kind of what you want your end state in Datadog to be, is extremely critical to having a good migration. And again, this ties into the next objective, which is mapping dashboards and alerts. So within Datadog, you want to make sure that you're not losing anything that you're carrying over from these legacy tools. So this means critical views that your users use, alerting that your teams get to let them know that there's an issue. All of these need to be carried over. So when you're building this migration plan, scoping that work, designing, okay, which ones do I want to carry over? Which ones are critical to my business? Which ones haven't been used in a while? Stuff like that is very important. For example, if you have, say, 100 dashboards, you should always take a look at them and see which dashboards are actually being used. You'd be surprised how many teams look at dashboards and say, oh, there aren't any, 80% of our dashboards haven't been used in the last year. It's doing stuff like that. You can not only treat this migration as a way to enhance your data with Datadog, but you can also use it a way to streamline and improve the quality of your monitoring environment. The next step is kind of designing what you want to do after you implement Datadog. So, and this goes into stuff like building your logging pipelines, or building your data ingestion. So for example, within Datadog, a lot of your logs are going to go through pipelines which process and sort out logs. So if I'm ingesting an Apache log, Datadog will use an Apache pipeline to extract important attributes out of it. When you're ingesting these logs into Datadog, it's important to make sure everything is getting processed so you can use that logging without limits feature inside of Datadog. Otherwise, you'll have, say, 50% of your logs using pipelines and your teams are using them to great effect, but you might have another 50% that are currently just sitting there, only having the tags coming in from the host. You're not really able to leverage them in a way that's useful or productive for your environment. They're just basically sitting in your logging set. And the other point is to also make sure that you optimize your data ingestion. So this could be things like, where is my data being replicated? If you're looking at a legacy tool and you see that you're ingesting all this data from logs, maybe there's an out-of-the-box integration that provides the same data that you're looking at a log to extract in that legacy tool. So looking for where those little duplicate areas are is also very important to not only ensure that you have your Datadog environment optimized, but making sure you're not double dipping when you don't need to. The next step is, how do I want to actually accomplish the migration? And how I usually see this done, and what I think is the best way, is kind of approaching it into a hybrid model. So what I mean by this is that you still run your legacy tools in a production environment, but you're running your Datadog environment into lower environments for either a week, a month, or even a couple of days. What this gives you is the opportunity for your teams to come in and take a look at the Datadog monitoring tool and go, okay, this stuff is great. Here's how we do this. But we have data gaps here that we need to look at. We have stuff that we're not collecting. It's basically a way for your teams to go in, stress test your Datadog environment, and make sure there aren't any holes. Because with any migration, there's a lot of data you're carrying over. So it's always important to go through and look at these individual little things and let your teams kind of look at their data in their context and be able to call out any missing data from this. And the final step is, after everything's been done, is to validate and fine-tune your alerts. Alerting is done pretty much differently in every tool that you'll see in the market. So Datadog does alerting one way, but a legacy tool or another tool might do it in a different way. So when you're doing these tool migrations, doing a one-to-one alerting can introduce unexpected sensitivity into your alerts. What I often see is that when you do the initial migration, alerts are massively spiked through the roof than what you're normally used to. And a way to kind of be proactive about this is to look at your alerts, look at the data before you turn them on, and say, okay, how much is this alert going in a muted state? How many times is it firing? And this allows you to understand, okay, I need to pare it back here because it's way too sensitive. This doesn't mean that Datadog isn't capturing the alert and the alerting data isn't valuable, but you also need to keep in mind that you're migrating from one tool to another, so nothing's ever going to be one-to-one. You need to learn to adapt and fine-tune your alerting to a Datadog context, not your old tools context into Datadog. And if you do it that way, you'll find that not only are you getting less alerts, but your teams are avoiding alert fatigue. So we'll move on then and talk about what happens if you do not do this process and why migrations often fail. So if you do not design a clear monitoring strategy, you're often going to find that your expectations are misaligned. Everyone's going to have what they expect to get out of it, and it's rarely the same thing. You could have, say, 5 teams in your environment that are using your previous tool, and when they come into Datadog, each of those 5 teams have different expectations. And if you do not go and collect those expectations and get an idea of what's going on in that, you're often going to find those teams are going to be unhappy with the product as they move forward. Additionally, this can lead to things like data consistencies. If you haven't collected information from the teams and you haven't designed a plan, you're probably going to encounter gaps in your data. No tool is one-to-one on everything. So how Datadog collects information could be different than your previous tool. So you want to make sure that you're always talking with the teams, gathering those requirements beforehand so you don't miss out on those critical logs and metrics. If you do not, you're often going to find that they are missing. Additionally, without those metrics, if you move all of your alerts over, suddenly those alerts aren't going to fire because they're missing alerting. They're missing the data for those alerts. This can, again, spiral into further incidents, further compounding issues. It's just as you start off, if you don't have the implementation plan, you're going to continually cascade down these issues in areas. With the increased incident risk, you can then track that into increased costs. What I mean by this is that if you have alerts going off that are not sending any data or not creating any data, you're missing issues, you're missing stuff that could cause outages in your environment, and suddenly you're no longer being able to address issues. So say if your alerting is missing on a critical web page, users are no longer able to use that web page, say for like a checkout. Suddenly, you're no longer making money for the duration of that web page until someone raises that issue. You've accidentally created a reactive alerting situation instead of a proactive alerting situation, which is what you would normally expect in Datadog. And this can create further lack of optimization because people do not want to use the tool. They feel like, the tool should have already been worked. There should have been a plan in place to get it. Why do they have to go back and fix it now? They'll find they won't want to optimize it after the fact because, the implementation went so poorly to begin with. And this can kind of further cascade. The teams will not use any knowledge. They can also lead to security misconfigurations, meaning that they will start, due to that lack of knowledge, they'll start doing a kind of throw things against the wall and see what sticks. This will lead to them start ingesting stuff like maybe sensitive data or things you don't want your users inside of Datadog to see. And without that, you're suddenly out of compliance. You're showing HIPAA information. You're showing GDPR information. You're suddenly exposed to all these different areas. And all this stuff is going to create a kind of political bad will inside your org. People are not going to want to adopt Datadog because they heard the migration went so poorly, because they heard everything, all this stuff compounded and added onto each other. And it can really all be traced back to this lack of a integration plan or a migration plan. Because if you do not have a migration plan, you're just going to continually have compounding issues come on, and that will lead to low to negligible user adoption, and then users won't want to use the tool even if they are onboarded to that tool. So what is the business impact of this? I kind of hinted this in the previous slide, but there can be kind of divided into 4 different categories. The first, as I talked about previously, is lost revenue. Again, so if your alerting is misconfigured, stuff isn't set up right, you're not going to get notified when outages that matter to your business actually happen. So that's going to cause a lot of problems with resolving issues, teams drilling down, getting further information on stuff, and just generally having a poor time getting alerts on Datadog. And this leads to lost revenue because, as that outage happens, you cannot do your business. Further compounding on that, you're going to have time being wasted trying to figure out if your implementation plan doesn't account for carrying over those KPIs, carrying over that key metadata, carrying over that key stuff that made your alerting system so important to those teams. They're going to start wasting time. They're going to start poking around. They might bring in whole teams that aren't even valid or needed for an issue into this action because they don't have an idea of what's going on, and they can't figure out what's going on because you didn't carry over that information. And this can, as I said before, can lead to security risk. As those teams are trying to figure out what's going on with the issue, they're going to start trying to ingest more data into Datadog to figure it out when they might already have that information. It's just not a well-defined, because you didn't migrate over your dashboards, you didn't get over your alerting for those teams. So they have no basis to kind of get in information and drill down into Datadog. And these can lead to risk because they'll start trying to ingest pretty much everything. And again, as I mentioned previously, this can lead to missing logs, ingesting sensitive data, getting GDPR, HIPAA compliant data into Datadog, and people seeing stuff where they shouldn't see it. And this can also further tailspin into uncontrolled costs. So as those teams are trying to ingest more and more data in, they're getting stuff where you, in your monitoring plan, might have said, oh, we're already collecting this as a metric inside of Datadog. The teams don't realize this because they haven't had any training. They haven't followed an implementation plan. They have no experience in the tool. So they're going to start ingesting more and more stuff, and they're going to start using features that Datadog might allow you to, capture for free normally, but they might instead be massively ingesting logs when you really could have gotten it from an out-of-the-box integration on an agent. And these things kind of all come together to create a kind of tumbleweed effect where you're just continually rolling downhill, picking up more and more steam, and kind of almost like it's watching a car crash in slow motion where you're because of this poor migration plan, you basically set yourself up for failure down the line. So how can RapDev help with that? So we are experts in migration. We have migrated pretty much any different tool under the sun. We've done it all. Whenever we do a migration, the first thing we do is design a structured roadmap migration. So not only do we leverage our expertise with Datadog, we also leverage our expertise with migration. So we'll design tagging to make sure that your tagging in Datadog is equivalent to what you had in your previous observability tool. We will scope out, where do we need to deploy the Datadog agent? What integrations do we need to set up to ensure that no monitoring coverage is lost? We will make sure that everything is set up for dashboards and monitors, that they're migrated over correctly. We'll ensure that your front-end web monitoring is carried over and extracted as well. Our goal is to make sure that we cover most, if not all, gaps before we start the actual migration by developing this migration plan. We do this in a security-minded way. So we're looking for things that, are HIPAA or GDPR compliant that we want to make sure to call out, where we need to leverage Datadog sensitive data scanner tool, or we need to mask or exclude coming out of the gate. We always are aware that there are going to be stuff that, you don't want end users to see inside Datadog. So we work very hard to be proactive and in eliminating that information instead of reacting after the fact. And we also make sure that your metadata is triaged and set up correctly into Datadog. One of the biggest things I see when in Datadog that people get wrong is they don't make sure they have a tagging strategy before they actually deploy Datadog. If they don't have a tagging strategy, they don't have any metadata, they don't have any organization. What I like to say when I talk about tags in Datadog is that they're kind of the source and the of truth inside Datadog. They are going to be your single source of truth. Everything that flows from a tag tells you that it's related to another entity. So if a team comes into Datadog and they're aware of the tags, they can see, oh, this belongs to my team. Or if they look at a resource, say, in somewhere else in Datadog, they can say, oh, this belongs to, a different team in my org. That's why tagging is so important, because not only does it assign ownership inside Datadog, but it can also be used to assign how data is organized, how data is split, how alerts are done. So we build your tagging strategy in mind of how do we ensure that those splits and those views account for what you were previously using in your old legacy tool. We also make sure that those tags and this migration plan align with what your business goals are. So say your business goal is to improve your website performance. We're going to make sure that, we set up your real user monitoring in ways that are grabbing you the metadata and the information that you want, and building views that allow you to be proactive in addressing any issues that are going on in that environment. We'll also make sure your data is coming in correctly. So this can kind of tie back to stuff like log pipelines and data ingestion. We'll make sure that your logs are going through all your pipelines, that your metrics are coming in, that you're not missing any integrations on your agents, and that you have things like log linking to APM to Brown real user monitor linking. You have your synthetic setup. We will go through and validate and make sure everything is working. And that can even extend to stuff like making sure that your dashboards all have data coming in from them after the migration. Your key monitors are alerting, and they're alerting safely and responsibly inside of Datadog. And we also will do this by working hands-on with your team. What I see a lot with migrations that don't work out well is that they don't engage with the teams on the ground, so the end users of the Datadog product. So what we make sure to do is we work with those teams and engage with them. And oftentimes in a migration, I'm not only meeting with the observability team that owns Datadog, I'm meeting with several other teams as well to get it. So the power users, those teams that are the ones that are really heavily using Datadog, even the ones that might not be using Datadog all that much, and looking for ways to improve their monitoring, enable them in Datadog, or even extend and cover gaps that they didn't even know existed. We make sure that we take all these items and kind of bring them all into one to really help accelerate a migration. So what does average legacy migration look like for RapDev, and what is the outcome of that? So on average, RapDev can usually reduce the cost of a migration by up to 32%. We've had customers like PayPal, Mercedes-Benz, MyFitnessPal, healthcare partners, StitchFX, and manufacturing. I'm sorry, I don't know what that symbol is. And we've helped them reduce the overall cost, migration, and just the general cost that they've had in observability by 32%. And we do this by creating a tool migration flow. It's very similar to this. So whenever you're doing a tool migration, we're going to kind of follow this as a template. Now, since everyone is unique and everyone is different, things might change, places might move, or there might be additional items on this list. But this is kind of what we do. And this kind of follows like what existing, say, Splunk migration would look like. So within the first milestone, we are doing discovery and foundations. What this is we basically have our senior engineers sit down with you and we talk through what exactly is going on inside Datadog. What are you looking to get out of Datadog? What does your tech stack look like? What tools are you using? What dashboards are you using? What monitors are you using? Basically, we're collecting information, we're ingesting. And the purpose of this is to ingest information so that we can then go ahead and build that migration plan. And that kind of ties into Datadog foundations. As part of any migration plan, we often see that the foundations of Datadog are neglected. The thought is, we already did this once in the old tool. We don't really need to do it again in the new tool. But what we find is that if you have to pay attention to what build a base in Datadog that works for Datadog, it can't work for your old tool. Datadog is a tool that if you have a good foundation going into it, you're going to get infinitely more value out of the tool than if you didn't go in with a foundation in mind at all. And what I mean by foundation in this scenario is stuff like tagging, stuff like any custom attributes that you want to get out of logs, any log pipelines, basically any metadata enhancements, views, dashboards, monitors that you need to make sure are created in there. So what we do is we take those two items and we create the migration plan from that. And once we get that migration plan, we start the actual migration process. And we kind of do this in the last 5 stages. The first stage is moving all data out of Datadog, out of your old legacy tool and into Datadog. And I don't mean like monitoring data or switching over agents. That comes in phase 3. What I mean by this is we want to make sure that unique views, unique data processing, stuff like dashboards, monitors, certain log pipelines, any log sources, basically any stuff that's unique to your environment that you need to carry over is taken care of and proactively moved over first. So for instance, in a Splunk migration, we're going to make sure that any log tool scripting or data analysis has equivalency set up inside of Datadog. This is to make sure that there isn't a loss in coverage or loss in observability from the context of your teams. It's really important that when you carry this stuff over, that these views are preserved, because not only does it give the teams a common jumping off point that is familiar to them, so that makes them easier to onboard into Datadog, but it also just makes the overall experience better because you already have this data carried over. This phase can extend all the way through the other phases, and it often does, but it really is kicked off immediately after the discovery. The next thing we do is we move into the automation deployment. So with any migration, you often have to rip off the old tool and plug in the new tool. So we will design automation based on whatever your organization is using. A pretty popular one we see is Ansible. So we will design Ansible playbooks for your org specific new use case. And we'll design a playbook, say, for example, to rip out the old agent and place Datadog agent in with all the configuration. We will design the full standardization for these assets. So if you full tagging, how the tagging will be deployed on those agents, how the deployments will go, we'll build all that out for you and then work with your teams to deploy that. So this is really important because it basically is the initial migration step in terms of what an actual migration is. You're actually doing stuff now at this point, but it is kind of the first in a many step. We've already done a lot of work just to lead up to this, because you need to think so far ahead of any migration for what you're doing before you can actually get to this stage, which is why it's phase 3 out of 5. So the next part is we begin the cutover. So we've migrated everything over. We have all your dashboards. We have all your monitors. We have all your specific stuff from your old tool inside Datadog now. And now is the time to kind of start opening up the floodgates. We start letting teams start using dashboards and monitors. We start deploying Datadog into lower environments. We start trying to get approval to move over to production. What I often see a lot is that once we've completed phase 3, phase 4 is more of a feedback phase where we are getting feedback from the teams, customizing views, updating stuff, making sure that there are no coverage gaps. Because Datadog's already running in these lower environments, we're making sure that everything's going over. And then the accumulation of this at the end of phase 4 is going to be the actual deployment of prod. And so this is the cutover phase, which is the last part of that. And then the final phase is the knowledge transfer, optimization, and improvement. So once we're in production, there's still going to be a couple of different little hairballs or little things that come up, and basically meaning like there's going to be little things that pop up that your teams are going to want changed or done. What we do there is we make sure and kind of resolve those last few issues, make sure everyone's happy and using and getting all the views that they want. But kind of the most important thing is now the teams have this new tool. How are they going to learn how to use it? And this is where we also come in. We will train your teams up. We'll teach them how to use Datadog. We will teach them little shortcuts, little tips and tricks, how to use template variables and dashboards, how to use variables and monitors, how to group by tags inside monitors so that you only have to create one alert where you would normally have to create 15 different alerts. We'll teach your teams on best practice methods of using Datadog so that they are enabled and can basically self-service themselves in the future. So a couple success stories with different tools that we've migrated off of. So with Splunk, we've helped with migration savings of up to $734,000 a year. We've helped people using New Relic reduce their mean time to respond by 30%. We've reduced alert volume with Grafana users by up to 26%. And we've cut the number of alert volumes down from AppDynamics by 4,000%. So we can help you ensure that you get positive business metrics coming out of this so that you can have a good success story to take to your leadership. And so this is kind of what an example migration plan would look like. So it's at a very high level, but this is kind of what the overall flow would be. So we would get the concerns, what are the main three questions or what are the main questions that we have over this? This will go into helping design the plan. And then we begin to go into like a migration process where we start the overall process. So for example, this is a Splunk migration again. So we start by automating the log injection. Then we go into upgrading and optimizing alerts for Datadog, enable end users, and accelerate value adoption. And then finally, we deliver results. So we help partners accelerate migration and provide ready-to-go skilled resources. So your teams will be enabled. You will be enabled to use Datadog at its full potential. We keep a pretty average timeline of 3 to 4 months to do a migration. And we also help a lot with tool consolidation as well. So with all these three things, you get very good results by using RapDev and Datadog together.
Perfect. Good work, Alex. So following on the how to migrate onto Datadog and what that process looks like, just a quick reminder here around how Datadog helps you level up. So first and foremost, that unified observability across logs, metrics, traces, LLM observability, real user monitoring, all in one single platform. Secondly, AI-powered anomaly detection and faster troubleshooting, making sure that you get to the root cause of issues as soon as possible after they occur, and preferably even before they occur. Cost-effective log storage with flexible retention, and finally, improved security monitoring and compliance, which covers all of the platform and pulls in all of your security signals from application code through to the cloud environments as well. So if we skip on to the next slide, please, Alex, this is where where I can take you through a couple of those innovations that I mentioned earlier around the logging platform. So there's a few different things that have come out recently to really help, both in terms of costs and just storing only the logs that you need in the relevant place. So the first one here is Flex Logs, which has decoupled compute from storage, which provides additional options for retention and control of your log retention costs. So perhaps keeping your logs within Datadog for longer than historically available with a standard index, but using compute to be able to query those slightly slower than the real-time logs of the standard indexes, but you're benefiting from that cheaper storage. Secondly, observability pipelines is proving to be a real benefit to customers, allowing them to route logs seamlessly, aggregate logs seamlessly across environments. So whether you're routing them from different cloud providers or different sources and then routing them into Datadog for immediate analysis and troubleshooting, and other tools for longer term storage or maybe deep dive SIEM analysis. This really helps answer some of those security and compliance questions coming from those teams. Thirdly, log workspaces has really empowered SREs and security teams to do much deeper analysis into logs. It's allowing people to analyze their logs, build out advanced queries without using a query language, and maybe really deep diving into troubleshooting issues or perhaps investigating security incidents faster. And all of that, as I've said all along, is correlated directly with other data sets, metrics, traces, real user monitoring events, so you can instantly see exactly what that the cause of that log was, or see the entire context of that log message. So to dive into them a little bit deeper here, first up with Flex Logs, this provides you the ability to have a much longer retention period for your logs within the platform at a much more lower budget for those logs, but you're maximizing the ability to still be able to investigate those logs, you'll still be able to query them and correlate them up with those other different data types. So these are really best fit for people who have those longer term audit requirements. Perhaps they're conducting security reviews and they want those logs to be around for maybe 3, 6, 9 months, up to a year, for example. Next up, observability pipelines. And Alex, if there's anything that you want to add into this one, please feel free to. But for those customers who are perhaps on premise and want to be a little bit more vendor agnostic, observability pipelines really sit much more towards your infrastructure. So it can sit on-prem, it can sit within Kubernetes environments on the cloud, for example, and it allows you to aggregate your logs locally, do processing on them, maybe strip out some PII data before sending them up to Datadog. That allows you to be much more security conscious. It allows you to remove some of those duplicates that may crop up. So you're really reducing that ingest cost into Datadog upfront. And then again, storing only what's valuable for you to store within Datadog. And you can perhaps carve off all of the other logs to S3 for real long-term storage over several years. So as you see at the bottom there, this is best fit for customers who have a real need to keep a very tight lid on control of volumes, what's in those logs, and maybe answer some of those security requirements. Alex, I didn't know if there was anything you want to add in.
Yeah, observability pipelines, in my experience, are also a very good edge case tool. So tools where Datadog traditionally wouldn't be able to get data out of, or the values that Datadog traditionally normally wouldn't be able to get with its out-of-the-box stuff. Observability pipelines present a way to ingest that data and transform it into stuff that Datadog can process. For example, if you want to like ingest a encrypted binary file, you can use a combination of Datadog workflows and observability pipelines to transform that into a readable log entry, which has been a huge thing for several customers I've worked with. It can be used for a lot of unique scenarios that Datadog normally can't do. They have now been unlocked with observability pipelines. It's a very powerful tool.
Perfect, thanks. And if we skip over to the last one here, within log workspaces, which has been a very recent addition and has proved very useful in both my troubleshooting and for customers as well. This allows you to gain enhanced control over your log data using a suite of powerful and collaborative tools, allowing you to transform and join data sets together, then build out and visualize sophisticated queries and create saved views that you can use within those log spaces or perhaps within some of your dashboards. What this means is that during an incident investigation, you might need to run complex queries, such as combining attributes from multiple different log sources, maybe transforming data, log data, to much deeper analyze your logs. So with log workspaces, you can correlate those different log sources together, aggregate multiple levels of data, join two different data sets together in a kind of a SQL join, extract data and do some calculations on fields at query time. So it doesn't need to be done at the parsing layer where you're indexing those logs. It can all be done at query time. And then finally, add visualizations to those transformed data sets that you can then use, as I say, within those workspaces or within dashboards as well. And all of that is done within the Datadog platform, giving you a real powerful way to take your logs beyond what's presented to you. You can really begin to pull out details such as your top orders for the week, who they came from, maybe add in those different price points, do some calculations on them, and see the results of your trading week or month, for example. All of the details for these offerings are available in our documentation. So if you want to dive deeper, feel free to look into the docs for those. And with that,
All
we
right.
reach the end of our webinar. So over to you, Alex.
Yeah, so we are now going to open up to Q&A. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat and we will be happy to answer them. It looks like we already got one. In cases of migration from Splunk, which used for IT operations in SCM, can you share some key challenges during the migration? Yeah, sure. So one of the biggest challenges that I see with a Splunk migration isn't necessarily pointing everything over to Datadog. It's more pruning what you're collecting with logs with what you would collect with other information or levers inside of Datadog. Splunk is primarily at its source a log-based tool, so we often see that teams are heavily using the log ingestion features inside of Splunk. So they often, when they go into Datadog, they think it's a one-to-one where they carry over all their logs and they build all their views from logs. Oftentimes, instead, you want to do a combination or strip back your log collection. What I mean by that is, if you're using logs to get the performance of, say, your Apache instance, that might be better served by using the Datadog Apache integration instead at the agent level. That's kind of like the biggest thing that I see with Splunk. Additionally, we also have to design pipelines and custom views using either Datadog log pipelines or, as Rich mentioned, log workspaces to develop custom views. And that tends to be a chunk of work as well, usually that we expect with a Splunk migration. But overall, Splunk is fairly easy to migrate between Datadog and from Splunk to Datadog because Datadog offers so much flexibility and controllability with its logging solution. Current data stores what about current data stored in Splunk? Can it also be migrated or only for future data? So for historical data, you cannot migrate that over to Datadog. You would only get future and present data. So if you want to have historical data inside Datadog, I believe, Rich, correct me if I'm wrong, you can send it as a metric or something else instead. But for logging in particular, you can only do current or future data.
Yeah, and it's something we see very often during that cutover period. Customers will leave their Splunk or existing tool up for a little bit of time whilst they're using Datadog and getting familiar with using the tooling there so that they still have the ability to go back and view the previous month, 6 months worth of data. But very quickly they leave that behind and carry on with their journey on Datadog.
Next question is, can you share approximately how much time it would take to migrate about 1,000 log dashboards and 200 alerts from Splunk to Datadog? So that is a loaded question, but I will try to answer the best I can. So the reason why it's loaded is because there is a huge variation in any migration. So there's always going to be custom use cases that will have to be met for any migration that's unique to your specific org. And we work with those to address those. So 1,000 log dashboards might be 3 months in some scenarios, but 1,000 log dashboards might be 6 months in other scenarios. So usually I say as around 3 to 6 months is the normal expected time. Going off of normal numbers, that tends to be more towards the 5 or 6 month number usually, but depending on the overall data sensitivity and like what automation you already have in place and the complexity of those dashboards and alerts, that might be less. It really depends on a lot of other factors that I probably don't know now, but between 3 to 6 months is the normal expected time frame.
And I think it's also fair to say it depends on what those numbers are. So in this case, the
Mhm.
question was 1,000 log dashboards and 200 alerts. Are those actually 1,000 dashboards that you are going to migrate? Quite often, customers will have been using their previous tooling for a long number of years. A large percentage of these dashboards are going to be stale. They're going to be test ones that somebody stood up and had a play around with. So quite often, a large number of these could be cut out of the migration, and just those numbers will reduce quite quickly, perhaps down to 500 dashboards and a few hundred alerts, especially when you begin using tagging properly within Datadog and having one dashboard serve multiple different use cases by using those template variables.
Yeah. To kind of span on what Rich was saying, any migration is not only a migration, but it's also an audit of your environment. You shouldn't be looking to carry over everything from your previous monitoring environment, both the good and the bad. You should only be looked to carrying over the good, and then it further enabling more good to come from the new tool. So whenever we do a migration, we always want to make sure to look at this data that we're carrying over and kind of optimize it and ensure that it's valuable for not only yourself, but for your users moving forward. How can I start the migration conversation from Splunk to Datadog? So I believe at the end we'll include some information on how to reach out to us to start that conversation going. But you can reach out to either myself or Rich or our respective LinkedIn profiles for either Datadog or RapDev to get that conversation started. We tend to work hand in hand with throughout the entire pre-sales process if you want to engage with both of us.